Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history and experiencing it. Conclusions you might not agree with and you might even be offended by. But the important thing to me is that you have your own conclusions, that you've studied American history, that you look into the topics that I talk about, and even more. It's just a survey, very surface, skimming the surface. A lot more depth you can do. And if you disagree with my conclusions, that's wonderful, as long as you have your own conclusions that you've drawn from studying yourself. So now let's begin. We're talking about Reagan's era, his administration still. And so I'm going to begin again with toward the end, trouble began to flare up in Central America as Panamanian strongman Manuel Noriega was accused, excuse me, of corruption and illegal activities. The State Department began negotiations with him to convince him to leave power. In February of 1988, a court indicted him on drug charges, and the United States stepped up the pressure on him to resign. Got to consider Noriega was part of that whole network that did help us with our Contra operation as far as moving drugs and selling. I mean, the whole thing was very corrupt. So Noriega, to turn on Noriega was kind of like, well, he was just going too far. But anyway, in February of 1988, a court indicted him on drug charges, and the United States stepped up the pressure on him, excuse me, to resign. The affair was damaging to the Reagan administration because Noriega had been a supporter of the Contra forces, and his drug trafficking had been either ignored or perhaps facilitated, with even former CIA director and now vice president and presidential candidate George Bush being involved in one way or another. This is George Bush the elder, not the younger one that you're familiar with the Gulf War or the second Gulf War, Afghanistan and Iraq and all that. The U.S. halted all economic payments to the Panamanian government, causing economic hardship, but no change of heart in Noriega. Even when it was offered that criminal charges would be dropped if he stepped down, he refused. The Iran-Contra scandal weakened the U.S. position in the Middle East, and during the long Iran-Iraq war, our government supported Iraq and allegedly even provided Saddam Hussein with chemical weapons. That's an accusation. We don't know for sure. We allowed Kuwaiti tankers to be reflagged as American so that U.S. warships could escort them through the Persian Gulf. Several incidents occurred, including a friendly Iraqi aircraft accidentally firing on a U.S. ship, causing heavy loss of life and damage, and the U.S. Navy shooting down an Iranian airliner, killing the more than 290 passengers on board. But shortly after the last incident, Iran did an about-face and agreed to a UN-brokered ceasefire. Yasser Arafat, the head of the PLO, was to speak to the United Nations in New York, but the Reagan administration denied him a visa on the grounds that the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, would not renounce terrorism. He did speak for the UN in Geneva, Switzerland, agreeing to make certain concessions to the United States, which resulted in the U.S. sponsoring direct talks with the Palestinian Secretary of State, George Shultz. It was hoped by establishing talks with the Palestinians, the peace process in the Middle East could be affected positively. So we'll continue about Reagan next, kind of finish up on his administration and a couple of things about him personally, and then we'll kind of review some of the previous sessions we've had before we go on. So in any event, thank you for being with me. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel and come to your own conclusions. Thank you.